All right, welcome back to The Average. It has been 2 weeks since we saw you last, and what did we cover last week, Bryce?
Uh, was it Flash?
Ah, yeah,
I
that's
think
two
so.
weeks ago already.
Feels like ages though.
I forgot that movie so hard.
Oh man,
Any,
forgettable.
anyways, welcome back to The Average. This is Tim.
And this is Bryce. Oh, I was wrong. Dungeons and Dragons. That's what it was.
Oh, you're right. We had Dungeons and Dragons.
Ah,
That's
so
right.
close there.
That's right. That's right. Okay, that's why it feels like The Flash was ages ago because
It
we
was
had
ages
another one.
ago. A whole month.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Ugh. It's not doing too hot.
Well, thanks for reminding everyone, Tim.
Yeah, we contributed to that. But
You're
anyways,
welcome. You're welcome,
we are
America.
speaking of America, we are back with a movie that is dividing the internet, strangely enough.
Is it?
Yeah, have you not seen?
I mean, between the mainstream media and people, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's been the divide. I don't think the
and
people
that's what I'm
themselves.
talking about. That's
Okay.
what I'm talking about. It's been pretty fascinating to see the feedback on this. So we're gonna
Right.
dive into our take today. We're talking about The Sound of Freedom.
Yep. Yeah, this one was not on our radar, like, at least for me. I'll speak for myself. It was not on my
It wasn't
radar like
online.
at all. And we were actually planning originally for either Mission Impossible or Insidious for this episode. And
Yeah.
then this movie was out and we went and saw it and we were just kind of like, so we're doing this one, right? And so
Yep.
that's basically why we're doing this one now. I mean, I don't know if I'll have any like hot takes per se, but this will be very interesting to say the least.
Yes, for sure. I know for me, I was neither here nor there on it. I was going to see it one day, whether I saw it in theaters or not. But then
Right.
my wife was like, hey, I really want to see this weekend. And for my wife to want to go see a movie is pretty rare.
Yep.
So I was like, all right,
Exactly.
I guess we're going to go see this.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. I guess I can just kind of give a quick overview of this.
all
It's a
right.
pretty straightforward plot. So this is based on a true story. I don't know when,
Or is it?
or is it? I don't really know when I'm pretty sure it's like not like super recent, but recent enough. Like the 2010s, I believe. And this is about a guy who was a government agent and basically took care of like sex trafficking and stuff like that. Like they would catch the pedophiles and whatnot, whoever was, going after the children. And then he basically kind of goes rogue and goes on his own mission after saving a boy who has a sister who's missing and wants to save the sister for just like, for his conscience and to sleep well at night, I guess, if you want to say it that way. And I mean, that's basically what this is. It's basically just a thriller, honestly, a suspenseful thriller, I would say.
Yep.
It's really fun, a really good time. So that's the story, though.
It, I saw early comparisons to Taken,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
which it's definitely less of an action movie than
Yeah, not
Taken
an
was.
action movie.
Yeah. And it's not an action movie at all. You nailed it with a thriller. There's two action scenes maybe.
Yeah, and it's fun. They're good action scenes.
Yeah, but the movie itself is tense.
Yeah, that's
It is
one adjective to use.
Yeah, it is tense. But yeah, and I'll have my thoughts on the comparison between Taken and this towards the end.
Oh, okay.
But do you want to dive into your story slash plot, or shall
Yes,
I?
let's. I'll kick us off here. Let's go ahead and get this ball rolling. So, story and plot, 5 out of 5. I don't even think there's a question about that. I thought the story was super, super well written and well done. There is not really any slow dead moment. I would say not slow moment, but like dead moment in this movie. Every single part of the story, I was just so invested in. I never found it dull. I never found it boring. The plot makes sense. There isn't really, obviously, for the sake of, an actual movie and theatrics, there is some dramatization of some of the sequences that probably didn't happen in real life. But I think it worked for the movie still. I don't really know what else to say. I'm not going to try to be pretentious about this. Like, it's just a really, really well written story. The plot is awesome. and we'll get into more of what makes that stuff awesome as we move forward. So, Tim.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. I gave the story plot a 5. We don't see a lot of movies like this made anymore,
Yeah,
period.
absolutely.
Uh, Also the fact that I did actually appreciate, it seemed to me that they entwined a fictional story with a real story.
Yeah, it was so
And
the movie was basically most of it was pretty true. Like it was just a little dramatized in some sections, obviously, just to
okay.
for a movie.
See,
But for the most part, it's a pretty like it's this is pretty much what happened. I've listened to a couple interviews about it, and he confirms that a lot of the stuff happened. Some of it's a little dramatized and a little different actually from what actually happened, but it's pretty much pretty close to what happened. Like I don't want to spoil too much because it's still new, but yeah.
yeah. Okay, I was under the impression that the brother and sister story was made up to tell the bigger story.
I'd have to double check that one, but I know
Okay,
like the boy's storyline, like everything up until the rest of the story takes place, is pretty true.
okay. So I thought it was really a really unique, really compelling story. I actually it's divided pretty well into 3 clear arcs throughout the
Yeah.
story,
Mm-hmm.
and they each kind of like they do their job as a proper 3 arc story should, setting the stage for the next one, increasing the scope as we go. It was a really well structured, really good story.
Yeah, absolutely, totally agree with that. Next is a character. I'll kick us off here.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I was telling Megan this as I was leaving. There's not a bad character in this movie at all. Like, I thought all the characters were just super, super well written, and well acted. We'll get to that later. But like for the characters themselves, like I just found every single character served a purpose. They all fit perfectly into story and moving it forward. Like I said, it's based off a true story with some dramatization, but it works. Like there's not a character that feels out of place, that feels forced into it. Every single character has a reason for being in the movie and moves the plot forward and doesn't like overshine. Like no one overshines anyone necessarily, and your main characters kind of stick in the front. Which to that Jim what is it,
Caviezel.
Caviezel, yeah, Jim Caviezel character as Tim Ballard was just he was just, you're rooting for him the entire time. I mean, he's just, you're on his side. You're just, it's amazing that his character never like beats anyone down, considering all the stuff he has to go through and whatnot. Is it Rocio, the sister?
The older daughter
The
or the
sister.
sister.
Yeah,
Yeah,
her
Rocio.
story, her as a character is just a tragedy, and it is just,
And
oh my
wait
gosh.
till I like when we get to the acting.
I know. I
Man.
feel like I'm getting into that other stuff, so I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, all the characters were great. 5 out of 5, no complaints.
Yeah, I gave so there was one significant part for me that gave the character arc a 5 out of 5. Like you said, I love the characters. I love what was his name?
Which one?
What?
Which one?
He was the former like,
Oh, Vampiro.
yeah, Vampiro. I loved that character because he was almost cliche,
Mm-hmm.
and but he added this kind of like, he was super serious and had some of my favorite moments in the entire film.
Oh, easily. Yeah, he was
Some
amazing.
Yeah, he told some heartbreaking stuff, but he also provided that like, I've been there, I've been on the dark side of this, and now I'm on the right side of this trying to make it light.
Mm-hmm.
He was great. He was a true standout. Um
His story that he told like towards
oh,
the, oh my gosh,
chills. But
yeah,
the other part that the part that really stood out on arc for me is what elevated it for me was at the beginning of the movie when they when they arrest the first guy.
yeah,
And he just has if you don't know what this movie about, it's about trafficking children and
yes,
child porn. So they get this guy, and he just has binders of children in his like locked back room. And uh Jim Caviezel, Tim Ballard, his partner at that moment goes to him like, I don't know that I can do this job. Like, these are some of the worst things I have ever seen in my life. And he said, and Tim responds and he's like, I've caught 277 pedophiles in my career. And the guy looks at him and goes, but how many kids have you saved?
That was a great moment that grounded this
Oh,
movie.
but there was, so that moment, Tim responds that it is not his job to save the children.
Mm-hmm.
Tim responds that under the legal system, all he can do is capture the pedophiles. And
Right.
he delivers it with some stern conviction. Like, it was
yeah.
good. But throughout the movie, well, pretty early on, actually, in the movie, his eyes are open that he can do more than capture just the pedophiles. He can save these kids. And by the end of the movie, you know, that is what he's attempting to do. And so that arc for him to go from this is my job to that moment later
Right.
when Vampiro says, I believe it was Vampiro who says it, like, when God tells you what to do, you don't ask questions.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
So it was a very nice and smooth arc for that character. It wasn't an easy one for him, but it was an excellent character arc.
Yeah, totally agree. So that then leads us into our editing effects, right?
Nope, music and sound.
Almost got it. You go ahead, go first here.
Music and sound, I gave it a 4. The music was actually striking in this movie. It was beautiful music that both tugged at the heart when it was supposed to and made your heart race when it was supposed to. There were a couple moments where there was swelling I can't talk. Swelling orchestra, and it was emotionally moving and worked beautifully. And there were a couple moments when it was like pounding drums.
Right.
And I really appreciated how the music kind of not only told us what to feel, but told us what the characters on screen were feeling at certain times. There were quite a few moments with Tim like sitting in a hotel room when it's not tense on screen, but the music is just this pounding drum beat.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because that's the tension that Tim was feeling in the film. And I thought they did a nice job of that. The music was actually a beautiful score that I would probably just pull up if I wanted some great string music. It was really well done.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I also gave it a 4 out of 5, and yeah, I think I almost gave it a 5 out of 5, but I think I landed back on 4 just because the music in itself is pretty cut and dry. There's nothing like that. There's nothing that makes the music itself stand out by itself. It was more of just how well placed and edited that music was. And also where they didn't use music either, like where they just cut to dead silence. And you know, we've had that praise for a lot of movies that handle it well. I think this movie's honestly, outside of the music itself just kind of feeling a little bland by itself alone, it was used to perfection within the parts of the movie. Every single scene that this music was in just elevated the scene in itself, I would say. And it's not just the music, again, it's the where it's been placed and how well it's been executed to go with the scene. I really enjoyed it. I think it elevates the movie as a whole, and it definitely gives you that gut punch to go along with an already really hard story to watch unfold in front of you.
Yeah, I agree. We're in agreement there. So on to the next one.
Yes, sir.
Editing and special effects. Looks like we differ here. I'll jump in
Finally.
with 5.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll jump in. I gave it editing and effects a 5. There's almost no effects in this movie whatsoever. It's a classic, like almost everything. Actually, I can't think of anything that didn't happen in front of the camera.
I'm thinking about
it
that.
looked like they used all, I mean, they weren't live rounds in the guns, obviously, but there was almost no special effects. There's no special effects in this film. But for me, the editing stood out on creating a level of discomfort that was necessary to tell this story. There
Mm-hmm.
were quite a few times so like early on, the kids are lured away from their parents by a modeling agency.
Yeah,
And where were they in Guatemala at this point?
I think so, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So this lady meets with the parents and is like, "Yeah, I think what your kid has what it takes to be a star," and shows them this pamphlet and says, "We're taking headshots at this place." And the parents just drop the kids off. There's a ton of kids there. They drop the kids off, and we sit there while they start to go through this modeling process. And the level of discomfort that you feel from the way it's edited it was spot on. And the same thing
Mm-hmm.
when they were capturing the pedophile with his binders of porn. Like, it shows you just enough to know what you're dealing with, but not enough to like repel you, but still make you uncomfortable, if that makes sense. Like, they don't
Yeah,
show anything bad, but the editing and the way it was shot and everything together created enough for your mind to like, oh, this is disgusting. I'm sick to my stomach. Like, and that, to me, that went to the editing, as well as just some, like, the opening shot of the movie is just
mm,
this slow pan over the rooftops in Guatemala into a window. And it's just another beautifully, like, that was actually the moment that I was like, oh, this movie is going to be better than I thought it was going to be,
yeah,
was the
exactly.
opening shot. The opening shot. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought this movie was actually wonderfully edited.
Yeah, I'm in mostly agreement with you there. I gave it a 4 out of 5. Um, and I don't know if I don't think it's super nitpicky. But the few couple things that did stand out was actually the helicopter was CGI for that one scene. I'm pretty sure as it was flying in. I'm
Oh,
pretty
when it kind of comes over the
yeah,
camera.
pretty
Yeah.
confident that that was CGI. And it did stand out. But it's not just that, because otherwise that would be a nitpick. That for me, I totally agree. I think the editing and special effects, even though there were no special effects, but just the effects in general, I thought it was a super super well done movie. My biggest thing that the one thing I will say is that there's a couple sequences where it feels like they just kind of it's very choppy as they like transition from like one thing like at his job to his home for like 5 seconds, and then it goes to the very next thing. It's like that felt
I agree with you
yeah,
there.
and
Yep.
now that happened a few times, a couple times too many, basically for me, and that's kind of what brought it down to a 4. Not to take away from the fact that the rest of the movie is super super well done with its editing and effects. So I mean I'm mostly in complete agreement with you outside of like that one thing that was kind of noticeable through the rest of the
Yeah.
movie. Really well done movie.
All right. So then we'll jump in. That is actually the same thing you were talking about jumping from family to work to whatever,
Yeah,
is why my script score is a 3.
interesting.
Um,
Go ahead.
yeah, because I actually felt that this movie had some great script moments, and that's why I gave it a 3. Like we talked about, Vampiro had an amazing moment in the script. But for the most part, like, those moments were kind of one-liners. Like that interaction I talked about at the beginning with his coworker,
Right.
that, well, how many kids have you saved? Like, there's not much else memorable about that conversation. There's not, and honestly, at some points I can't remember the conversation at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the script was a little lacking. I'm gonna be honest. I think it was a little lacking. It had some great, strong moments, but I don't think it was a perfect script or an elevated script. There were some great moments to remember, but for the most part, like, I get why the dialogue with his wife was there, but it didn't really stand out to me.
Okay. Okay.
Like, I get it to like establish that his wife is in support of this, and also like he is doing this because of his strong family connections. But I actually didn't think the movie went out of its way to establish the strong family connections. It was more focused on the story, and the family took a very, very much back seat, and that's fine. That's fine. It wasn't the purpose of the story, but I didn't think those moments were anything remarkable. So I gave the script a 3. I thought that was probably its weakest part.
Okay, interesting. Let me clap back now and tell you how it really is. It's a 5 out of 5, baby.
Why does it have to be a clap back?
Relax, Tim. Relax. We're all here to have fun. No, I gave mine a 5 out of 5. Yeah, let's see. I'll probably this will tie into a lot of like my scoring for the rest of the episode here, but just a reminder to everyone out there, this is Angel Studios. So in case you don't know who Angel Studios is, it's a Christian-based production company who has put out stuff like God's Not Dead. That's probably the only thing you've heard of, honestly. It's not even worth it going into any other movies because I can't even think of any off the top of my head.
Well, be careful there.
Yeah, I know.
Well, because they did not make this movie.
I know,
and
that's
distributed
and
it.
that's why I was very pleased with the fact that I have a whole thing about that, but
okay.
Anyway,
so we can go into those details at the end.
Yeah, we can go into more of that end. But anyway, I was very surprised to see that Angel Studios took I would consider it a risk on this movie, considering that there's very dark subject matter. There's cursing in it. There's drug use. There's alcohol. Like, this coming from a Christian company and based on every movie they've made beforehand, this is very much not the movie you would expect from them or them 100%. To fund. Yeah, and so for what the script is, I think that this script was very grounded and just really tight. I like you said, there's some great one-liners in this, but it's not just one-liners. There's some great just moments of just sitting there and talking and setting up the bigger picture. Like we said at the beginning, like he sits down to talk with the pedophile, and get to know more about him. That entire like sequence had some really good moments of them just sitting there talking, seeing how he has to get into the mind of a pedophile in order to understand and get more information. There's the moments where he sits down with Vampiro and they have very good conversations, and Vampiro has a wonderful sequence where he just lets it all out of why he does what he does. There's a couple good moments with George even that really elevated your love for these characters. And we're not even talking about the bad guys. There's it's just the script itself just felt like it wasn't overblown. It wasn't like over dramatic. Like it just made everything feel grounded, and it just felt threatening. Like there was like a dread to every word that was coming out of these characters' mouth. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I saw no issue with the script at all. Honestly, I thought it kept the script for a movie that has very little action and a ton of talking. Like your script has to be good. And I can't think of a single moment where I was like, yeah, the script kind of like took me out of it there or whatnot. Something this character said fell out of place. Like, nah, it was all good. I have no complaints. And maybe that's being very generous of it. So yeah, if it was a 4, I could totally understand that. Even a 3, yeah, I get that. But I just the script was really well done in my eyes, and so yeah, 5 out of 5.
I think you changed my mind. I think I would come up to a 4. I don't think I'm ready yet to give it a 5.
No, that's fair.
But you did point out that like a lot of this movie takes place in conversation.
Yeah.
And thinking back on it, like I was glued to every conversation, and each one brought something different.
It brought levity to every situation that was presented per scene.
Speaking of levity, there was actually some on point humor that I did not expect.
Yeah,
I did not expect it, and I was like, "Oh, that was actually very funny." So,
I totally agree.
Yep. All right, so on to the next one. We are discussing the acting. Oh,
yes.
This is where I almost docked it.
Okay.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I almost docked it because Jim Caviezel plays Jim Caviezel in every movie he's in.
How dare you, for one?
Okay, but then I had to take a step back, and every other person in this film is fantastic. But also Jim Caviezel has, when he is playing the drunk American on Holiday,
Mm-hmm.
I saw a different portrayal in him. And part of my experience with Jim Caviezel is he's playing very similar characters. I don't know if you ever watched Person of Interest.
Oh, I want to say I have, but I can't remember, so I'm gonna
It
say
was a
no.
great TV show. It was a great TV show, but he was the lead in that show, and the character was
Mm-hmm.
very, very similar to what he was playing in this movie. And then we also had, he was Jesus, okay, but
And he played Jesus, no big deal.
yeah, he played Jesus. But because of that, I was like, oh, Jim Caviezel's playing Jim Caviezel again. But then he
Yeah.
did bring some kind of different performance to the Drunk American, and I actually really enjoyed that performance. I thought that was really well done. The standouts for me are Vampiro and the kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those kids, and normally I am quick to harp on child actors because I don't think they can deliver that well. But man, these two, I was sitting there watching, how did they get these kids to act this way and keep them from knowing what's actually happening?
Mm-hmm.
Because the subject matter is so real and horrifying that I didn't want those kids on screen to know what they were filming. But there is a scene that they are in a shipping container.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that scene in the shipping container when they are screaming at the one window that's not even a window, it's an exhaust fan. When they are screaming at that one window is one of the most heartbreaking and horrifying scenes that I have ever seen. Like, at that point, I was like, this is a horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
It got under the skin, and that it was 100% because of the kid's performance in that was bone chilling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was honestly, it was awful, and that's what made it amazing. Like, it was awful to watch and to understand what was happening, but their performances were absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even touch on like the positive scenes with these same children that just melt you at the end, and well, not even at the end, and other scenes throughout, but like the child performances in this movie were incredible.
Yeah, totally. So let me just, basically write your tailcoats there. I also gave it a 5 out of 5. I agree. Jim Caviezel had a amazing performance as Tim Ballard. There's just something about Jim's like face that just it's like I heard the
how does he look out of shape and in shape at the same time?
No, not the road I was going with that one, but okay, fair point, I guess.
Sorry, it's something I noticed.
No, I heard this comment made that like he has the eyes of a guy who's just seen enough in life. And man, does that show in the movie? He's just got such a warm and welcoming presence for playing this role, and it works perfectly. Bill Camp as Vampiro was one of my favorite standouts of the movie. He's one of my favorite characters.
Yes.
Yeah, the kid actors. So it's Crystal and Lucas, as Rocio and Miguel. I'm with you. Like this is I'm trying to think of like another kid actor that had as great of a performance as these two did. Man, I'm genuinely trying to figure it out because this might be one of the greatest kids performances I've ever seen in a movie, like hands down.
I think that's a safe thing to say. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, and again, I've listened to some podcast episodes on this movie, and there is a story that they were not allowed to tell the kids what they were doing, and it kind of slips out to one of them, and like they were crying for like months. And there's actually a scene in the movie that was real because it was kind of slipped out of what role she was playing, and she was that her crying in that scene was her actual like feelings of like finding out what she was like playing as, and she apparently it apparently messed her up for like a good month or so. She was crying for a long time about it, but
Well, that makes me question the ethics of the whole
and
thing.
it was her acting coach or whatever, so you know it is what it is, I guess. But the directors and stuff tried to keep it hush hush. It was her coach that kind of let it slip out. I don't think it was on purpose necessarily, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I'm not gonna beat the dead horse too much. Like
Yeah.
everyone did a phenomenal job. There's not a single complaint from any actor, which means a lot because I don't know any of these actors outside of Jim Caviezel. So that's what's even. I even know I didn't know who he was until I looked it up. I was like, oh yeah, I've seen him. But yeah, everyone did amazing. 5 out of 5s across the board.
All right. So on to direction then.
Sweet.
Do you want to do this or
yeah, I can
Okay.
kick us off here.
Okay.
So I gave mine a 4 out of 5. Again, this was kind of just like it was a one thing that kind of stood out to me towards the end. I felt like the transition into the final act of this movie felt a little bumpy, and I don't want to say I was like checking my watch to see what was happening, but it's kind of one of those things in movies where if it just kind of feels, if it sorry, not feels, but like if the final act kind of comes out of nowhere, even though the act before it kind of felt like it was getting ready to close it, that kind of just throws me off a little bit and kind of ruins the flow for me. So I'm just being kind of picky about it. My flow was kind of ruined going into the final half. Not to say not the final act. Not to say the final act was bad by any stretch. It was a really good final act.
It is a left turn though.
It is a little bit, and so that's why I docked it there. So I gave it a 4 out of 5, but that's not to take away from the fact that again, this movie from beginning to end it just grabs you and it never lets go. It just pulls you in closer and closer. I thought the director did a phenomenal job with this movie. Alejandro was his name.
Yes.
He did amazing work on this movie. This movie is intense, and he shows it with every single scene, every single direction made to the characters that are in this movie and this story. It is just, it's enticing. You can't take your eyes off of it. It's so good.
Yeah, I gave the direction a 5. I do agree that the final act was a bit jarring because I was also checking my watch, but I kind of just assumed I was checking my watch because I thought the movie was shorter than it was. So I was kind of like, when am I getting out of here?
No, yeah, I saw that too.
Then, yeah, I thought it was like an hour and a half, and it's definitely over 2 hours. I think it's like 2:12, but I didn't necessarily assume that was the movie's fault because I was still engaged in the story. Like I still wanted to rescue this child. I actually appreciated the ending for kind of giving us a juxtaposition of clientele that this movie's dealing with.
Yeah.
So we went from really ritzy setting to the deep jungles of South America, and they kind of clash, and they do that on purpose. And but more my direction is it goes back to the way this movie was edited, but also the way this movie shot, the way he put this whole movie together is, and I read somebody said who it was a negative review, but they said it was an art house film masquerading as a thriller. And I actually I agree with the art house part. This movie is beautiful at spots.
Oh yeah.
There are scenes like I mentioned, it was a horrifying scene in that shipping container with the kids, but the way it was shot is that it was almost a square ratio on screen. Like we're not seeing the widescreen on the edges. We are just seeing the square end of the trailer on the screen, and it made it feel so confined, and it was so artistically it was stunning. There are quite a few scenes in this where the lighting in this movie was fantastic.
Oh yeah.
The lighting was beautiful. Some of the nature, I could tell they were not using stock footage. It looked like they were out there shooting. But just a lot of the shots were moments that if you pause it looks like an artistic photograph, like a professional took it. and I think a lot of movies miss that kind of artistic balance to your shots nowadays. I'm not gonna pick on certain studios. Um, but there were, like I said, from the opening shot where it was a slow pan inside to a little girl's bedroom as she sings, it was just, first of all, it was stunningly beautiful from the far distance when we watched the sun coming up over the city. Like, it was stunning. And
Yep.
then the movie closes on something very similar, and you feel like you've come full circle, and it was
Yeah.
just really well done film. I was surprised. I went and I looked up the director because I want to see what else he's done, and he's only done 2 other movies, but he has two more coming out still.
Yeah.
So, but I do think you mentioned that it's released by Angel Studios. From my impression was that it had Disney's backing while it was being made.
It was under the Disney umbrella, yes, originally.
So I think they didn't have a huge budget, but they had a decent budget while making the movie.
Yeah, it was okay.
And it looks really good. It looks far better than I anticipated.
It looks better than its budget has any right to look like.
It is a really well done movie.
Yeah, totally agree.
So then that takes us, we have our it factor.
Okay.
Do you want to kick off on your 5?
Yeah, I was looking at it just to make sure that was my score, because I thought it was different, but it was not. So my it factor was a 5 out of 5, and I thought I had given it a 4 out of 5, but now I see it as a 5 out of 5, so I'm gonna have to defend that now.
Yes, you are.
I actually, you know what? I think it could be a 4 or a 5. I think if it's anything less than a 4, I think you're wrong. I just don't see how you can't give this anything but those 2 numbers, because I don't think this here. Okay, here's why I gave it a 5 out of 5. Usually, one of the reasons I keep it a 4 out of 5 more often than not is because of longevity. I don't think this movie's objective was to have a lot of longevity to it necessarily. It's definitely very much a here and now kind of movie. Like this, it's supposed to affect, everything here and in the here and the now. I don't think that this movie was trying to be remembered in like the next 10, 20 years plus. Like, I think it's here for this moment that we live in now. And I mean, again, how can you give this thing anything less than what it deserves after it was under Disney for 5 years and basically just continued to be shut down? They've already opened up and talked about how there was a lot of hurdles they had to go through just to get this movie out there. And then it was picked up by a Christian studio that would probably never make a movie like this. And they decided to
never afford to.
Yeah, that too. Like, they probably can't afford something like this. The best looking thing that Angel Studios has made is The Chosen, but that's a TV show, and it's the first thing that they've made that has gotten like outside. It was the first show about Jesus to get multiple like seasons and sequels. God's Not Dead is the only movie that got sequels from them that I can think of. It was actually like successful. At least the first one was, but just the journey that this movie had to go through, and not just that, it had to go up against 3 juggernauts for the past 2 weeks in Insidious, in Indiana Jones, and Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible, I would understand beating this one out because those movies are just never bad, it feels like. Insidious is a little bit more.
There wasn't a time when you could say that, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say that maybe on 2 and 3 I would understand, but 2, from what I've heard, I actually haven't seen all those, so I need to get on that. But Insidious is more of like, okay, that's a whatever. It's a summer horror movie. Have fun with it, I guess.
Yeah.
But then there's Indiana Jones, which it blew out of the water. It wasn't even close how much more money this movie made. And you just compare the budgets of these movies. It is ridiculous how much more money and how much more successful that this movie was. And we were just talking about it at the beginning.
I just think that's hilarious because Indy is being released by Disney,
Yeah,
and
and yeah,
Disney dropped this movie.
exactly.
And I think that's hilarious, and suck it, Disney, because you assassinated one of my favorite characters from childhood. Indiana Jones was my dude, and I'm not watching this new film. I'm not watching
I
this.
might watch it. I
So
need I need movies from my top 10 worst movies of the year, so I'm gonna have to
we
like.
should spite watch it once it's streaming.
I still need to spite watch Little Mermaid.
Oh man.
Anyway, to finish
At
up.
least they can't assassinate a favorite character.
Oh man, I love that movie. The first one or the original one. The second one's actually kind of good too. Anyway, to close out my point, I don't see how you can't give this a 4 or a 5. I think this movie is absolutely got the it factor. There's not many movies that take the kind of risk in this, in the environment that we live in today, with what's going on and stuff. Not many movies would take the risk that this movie took, let alone the studio also taking that risk as well. 5 out of 5. But again, 4, I get it, but yeah, your turn.
Yeah. I gave it a 4 strictly because it doesn't have big studio production for its advertising. And that shows in the fact, like, right before we started recording, we can only find one poster for it. So there's only one poster made. You're not going to see a lot of posters made. Most of the advertising is they're actually being very smart and strategic with it.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas it is not your traditional, like, hey, this is the next Star Wars film. Everybody's talking about it.
Yep.
This is like, hey, have you heard of this movie?
This movie has
well, you
straight
should
up
go see it.
Yeah, this movie has straight up gotten all of its traction just from word of mouth. I will go
Word of mouth.
I'm dead serious. Like, I will put all my money that I guarantee you 95%, 98% of this movie's like sold tickets are just from word of mouth alone. We're 2 weeks out of it, and you said your theater was sold out. Our theater was just about sold out still, and not many movies have that kind of power in the second week.
So here's the thing we found out. I think we found it out last night. So in my town, for those of you who don't know our personal lives, in the last month, I think both of us have moved homes. Were you in the last month?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll say in the last 30 days, whatever. Both of us have moved homes. There's been major transitions. I'm in a new town now, but the theater we were at in town, there was actually they just do limited showings. I think each thing, they were only showing this weekend, and it had 2 sold out showings. So we sold out the first night we were there, and they sold out the second night as well. And they said because of that, the studio is doing, if you stick around at the end, there's a way to pay it forward, where you can purchase tickets for other people to see it, which, if I was telling my wife, I was like, that's brilliant marketing, because your ticket sales go up whether someone shows up to the movie or not.
Yep, exactly.
That looks really good for the studio. But the local theater posted that they sold out 2 showings, and they are about 40% left on showings in the coming week. They're doing additional showings this coming week on like Wednesday and Thursday. Right. And there's only like, people have already purchased those tickets for others on those days. So like, it is word of mouth. It is that pay it forward system. It is talking about it. And this is the kind of thing that, like, you'll go to the local bar and hear somebody talk about it, or you'll go to church and hear somebody talk about it, or we were walking out and there were people going to restaurants across the street. Like, that is how you're going to hear about this movie, because you're not going to see a trailer for it on TV.
Yep, exactly.
And so because of that, as brilliant as it is, I see you could give it a 5 because it is a unique and different kind of cultural significance, but I gave it a 4 because it doesn't have that big budget to put it on every TV in the hospital waiting room. It doesn't have.
But
that. I've seen Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny way more than I have seen Sound of Freedom stuff.
But that's my point right there.
That's why you could go 4 or 5. I totally agree. But like, I've seen Indiana Jones stuff way more than Sound of Freedom. Right. But I haven't heard of a single person who saw Indiana Jones, while I have heard of a bunch of people who saw Sound of Freedom.
Yeah, and
So
that's my
like,
point. Like to the 5 out of 5 is just like I don't, you know, Indiana Jones has all this marketing to back it up, and it's doing so much worse than this movie is. And this movie is solely doing like, and that's what I mean. Like, even though this movie isn't aiming for longevity, I think we had plenty to see from the first couple weeks that, oh, this movie definitely has an impact because of the numbers that we're seeing and because it's only coming from word of mouth basically at this point. I feel like that speaks just levels to how much of an impact this movie is having on like just the nation as a whole. And even as you dig into like stories about like what's going on and how this movie is having effects both on people's lives, both on Hollywood and even the theaters. Like there's issues. There's apparently stuff going on in theaters that people are talking about as well. Whether it's true or not, that's that's whatever. But I mean, that's something. And I feel like I can't remember the last movie that truly did something like this and whatnot. Not to say your 4 is wrong or whatnot, but just to like kind of go off of what you were saying. Hey, listen, man. All right, let's close this thing out.
I think we are both in agreement here on like it could go 4 or 5. I see the
totally,
5
yeah.
as in the cultural significance is there. I overlooked that because I was looking at studio budget.
Yeah, I get it,
and that's why I gave it a 4. So I agree. And so let's jump into final scores.
Yep.
I have some final thoughts for it. My entertainment value. Sorry. My entertainment value was an 8, which brings my final score to a 44 out of 50.
Keep going.
Okay. So for my final thoughts, I mentioned at the beginning that this movie got comparisons to Taken, and while it's not the action movie that Taken is, when Taken came out, I was in high school. I think it came out in 2007, 2006 maybe.
I think so, yeah.
Great movie, great action movie, but the cultural talk around that movie was so different than the talk around this movie.
Yeah.
And that's where my final thoughts are, when did this become political? When did the message of this movie, a movie that is not political at all, there's no politics in this movie. There's no presidents. There's no left or right. There's no talk of socialism. There's no talk of whatever. It's not a political movie. It is a movie about saving children. And I've seen just the massive press, like you mentioned early on, mainstream media kind of versus the people who have seen it. And I'm reading some of these mainstream media that like they discredit Tim Ballard. Okay, that's fine. There's actual footage of the operations and raids that he went on. These people are actually in jail and these children were actually saved. So discredit Tim Ballard all you want. That's fine. Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to discredit somebody who there is actual evidence of saving? And I've seen people talk about like, oh, there's not actual evidence. I'm like, did you not see the actual footage from the raids? They film all of those. But then the other part is I've seen it called a QAnon film. That it is hand in hand with QAnon conspiracies. And that blows my mind because did the people who wrote that article not know that Epstein existed? Do they not know that he ran an island just like they talk about in the movie? Like, yeah, in the movie, they set up their own island to do the exact same thing that Epstein did. And everybody was outraged about that. But because this is a movie released by Angel Studios, it becomes a political issue. Like that's what I can't wrap my mind around on this movie. And the fact that when Taken came out almost 15 years ago at this point, the talk was how horrible trafficking is and that it is happening. And they were talking about like places to avoid, countries to avoid, or not necessarily avoid, but be cautious and don't let your kids out of your sight, you know. That was the talk 15 years ago, and now the talk is discrediting or calling this movie a conspiracy theory aligned film. And I don't think that talk is healthy. I don't think that talk is productive because I don't understand the purpose. There's so much evidence to trafficking that doesn't even have to tie to QAnon. We know that the QAnon, there's some deep dives that you can do. It's pretty entertaining stuff, whether you believe it or not. Same thing. But like, I don't understand why this is a divisive film.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why, if you see this movie, you're a conservative. Or if you don't like this movie, you are a liberal. Like, or a liberal has to dislike this movie. And I hope that's not the case. I hope this should be a movie that unites people, whether it was released by Disney or by Angel Studios, that this is happening. And it helps us to be aware of it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna do a hashtag save the children, but you know.
Well, it's hashtag God's children are for sale.
Oh yeah, we're changing the hashtag after this. But that's my whole spiel on this, and I don't understand it, why it's a political issue. I don't think children doing adult things is a political issue. I think it's a horrible issue. So I don't really have deep thoughts on it. I just, like, afterwards, I gave this movie a 44 out of 50. It's a great film, but it's a disturbing film. It's not one that you walk out of cheering and clapping or out of excitement. It's not Rudy. It's, you know, it is an uncomfortable movie to watch. And differently than Taken was uncomfortable to watch, but had a pretty satisfying conclusion and didn't really dive too much deeper. This movie goes that little bit deeper, and it makes you uncomfortable and it makes you think. And I don't think what it is bringing up should be a politically divisive issue. I think everybody should see this movie because there's no politics in this film.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna bring up the political side of it, but since you did, I will.
I don't think you can talk about this movie right now because, like you mentioned earlier, the mainstream media is hating on this movie.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't know why.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I mean, you know, we all got our opinions, I'm sure, on that. Yeah, my entertainment was a 9 out of 10, bringing my final score to a 46, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'll divulge a little. I'll actually go a little step further from where you were saying that this movie is not just apolitical. This also isn't a religious movie by any extent. The only thing you can tie religion to in this movie is the line that God's children aren't for sale, and that could be used either religiously or metaphorically speaking. Like that doesn't inherently make it religious. And so I'm in agreement with you. I don't really see the backlash to this movie at all. I feel like this is a movie, whether it was good or bad, we can all kind of get behind it. But the fact that it's a great movie, like, I haven't seen a single person say they hate this movie. Any like normal person who doesn't, you know, work for a big corporation. I have not seen a single person say it's bad.
I saw some trolls online.
Yeah,
they were out to troll. That was it.
Exactly.
So.
Like the consensus from what I've heard is that this is one of the best movies to come out this year, hands down. And I don't see how anyone could dislike this movie or disagree with its messaging at all. So anyway, now that I got that out of the way, I was thoroughly I'll use enjoy loosely because it wasn't. The movie was very well done. I was not bored at all watching this movie. The story was super compelling. The characters, you love every single one of them. It touches on very dark subject matter. One that's very close to home for me as well, and so this, it hits a chord with me that really connects. And yeah, I can't remember the last movie where I was in a state of genuine anger through most of it. Yeah, that a movie has not made me feel that way in a long time, and that just kind of goes to show, I think, how great this movie was and how well it was directed and executed. If you haven't seen this movie, absolutely go see it. Like, this is worth every penny in your bank account to go see. And this movie is, based on every movie I can think of I've seen this year, this is probably the best movie I've seen this year by far.
Wow.
Because the only one I can think of is John Wick 4, and like, I love John Wick 4, but man, this movie's something else, and I genuinely really enjoyed it. It was a good time, but not in that way. But like, it was a good movie. Like, it's not a good time. Like, it's really sad and it's heavy, but yeah.
No, it is one of those that's it's kind of weird to talk about because it is a dark movie, and it's one that you should see. So
absolutely, don't take your kids.
Yeah, and then if you're somebody who's like, I don't know. There's free tickets out there.
I was gonna say, the people are buying tickets for each other, so have fun with that.
If you're not sure you want to spend the money on it, use one of the pay it forward tickets that they're using. I don't know if you find those on Angel Studios website,
I don't know either,
or what, but I think you can go to Angel Studios website to find them. Or I know, like, my local movie theater already has tickets bought that are pay it forward, and they're just gonna hand it to you if you need it. But so if you don't want to spend the money on it, go check out the pay it forward tickets and just go see what this movie is about. Don't listen to some podcast or NPR or whatever you're listening to, and go form your own opinion on this movie. Just go see the story that's being told, because for some reason that I cannot figure out, it's being put out there as a politically divisive Christian versus non-Christian movie, when it is none of those things. It is none of those. It's not a Christian movie. It's not a political movie. It's an important movie.
Amen.
So that takes our final score to a 45 between the two of us. We would love to get some other scores in here. So a 45 on our scale takes it to an amazing rating.
I know Megan has a score for this too, so whatever she put in, so.
And Megan's is also a 44, so technically that would bring it down to 44 point whatever, but we'll round it up to 45.
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah, so 45 out of 50, which is amazing. I actually, for social settings, I actually do think this is an important movie for social settings. It might be hard getting a group of people to sit down and be quiet for this film.
Definitely not a party movie at all.
Yeah, it's not a party movie, but it is one that, if for some reason you're in a group of friends that's looking to be charitable or looking for some cause to get behind, and you can do some research with your friends and watch this movie. But it is worth the watch.
Totally. So that wraps this up, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's all we got for you this time. If you saw the movie, head over to our Instagram, our Facebook, our YouTube, what's the other one? Rumble.
Yeah.
Let us know
Twitter,
what you thought. Leave a like, leave a comment, smash that follow button, please.
Please? Can you do
that?
Comment,
I think we got
leave a like.
Guys, we're struggling on followers on YouTube. I'm just gonna be
You're
honest with you.
Not supposed to tell them. It doesn't matter, Tim. We do this because we love it.
No, we do this because we love it, but we have like 15 followers, but some of our episodes have gotten 100+ watches. So,
I actually did see that. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, so hit that follow button, hit that subscribe button, get those notifications so you get the next one. But more than all of that is be a part of the next one. Send us your scores. Send us your thoughts. We'll read it. We'll get it out there.
For literally any movie, not just the ones we watch. Like, anytime you sit down and watch, like, there's so many scored movies in here that I have from movies we haven't done an episode on, because I'm going to use it at the end of the year. So there's that. But yeah,
we have every time I sit down to watch a movie on Tubi, I end up scoring it at the end of it just so I can keep in my own mind how great the 80s slashers were.
Here goes Tim again with his 80s slashers movies.
I was waiting for a comment on my left turn into 80s slashers. If I can plug 80s slashers in anywhere. Anyways.
But with that being said, I think we're pretty good on this one. Letting y'all know, though, next one is Oppenheimer. It's going to be the movie of the year. Y'all better be ready with your scores. Christopher Nolan's dropping another banger.
Barbie.
No, we're watching Oppenheimer first. We'll do Barbie later, but Oppenheimer is number 1 on the list now.
I thought it was Barbie.
No,
I want to watch Margot Robbie.
We're watching both of them, but Oppenheimer comes first because that's the movie of the year right there, okay? So get your scores ready, get your popcorn, get your kids. Maybe not your kids. That's pretty dark movie, probably.
Isn't it his first R-rated movie?
Ooh.
I heard it is Nolan's first R-rated film.
Yeah, I'm just so excited for this movie, man. Please, everyone, get your scores in for this one. I'm excited.
Let's hope it's better than Nolan's last 2 movies. So,
okay, fair. Tough but fair. Well, with that being said, thank you all for watching this episode or listening to it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments and leave a like. Let us know if there's any movies you want us to check out. And we will see you all in the next episode.